Oh my God. So we had a card last night with a lot of Canadians. Okay, guys. And unfortunately for the the male contingent of the Canadian fighters that were on this card, UFC 297, they went 0 for 7. It's not a good look. Didn't love it. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go through the card and examine some of these piss poor results. What do they say? 6 Ps? Piss poor planning prevents proper performance. I don't know what it is. I probably said it wrong.
No, your boss told you that.
Yeah, right. As a corporate, let's blue sky this for later. So we're starting at the beginning of the card. This was actually a good one for Canada because we had Jasmine Jasdavicius coming out with usually it's every 6 months or a year, the UFC does a ritual sacrifice of Priscilla Cachoeira where they kind of bring her out. It's like the Mayans when they would, sacrifice a blood sacrifice, right? They're like, oh, we need to pump this prospect. So we get Mario Yamasaki to just let her die underneath Shevchenko. Basically, it was the same thing happened here. She got smashed. And she looked like she might have some moments on the feet. She actually had a decent couple of fights here and there where she was knocking people out. But here, overpowered, outgunned, outmanned, and ultimately just choked out. We saw that Dar setup happening for a large portion of the fight. She was sliding through in half guard and just trying to get that in there. It was nicely done. Listen, Jasmine Jasdavicius is definitely a contender, and I would love to see her just keep on pumping. You know what I mean? But I want to see the level of competition up a little bit for her. So she was a rare bright spot. Overall, I'm not going to cover every single one of these, and we're not, but we're definitely going to cover some of the ones that were like either big surprises or guys that we were hyped up about. I know for me, guys, I don't know about you, but one of the things I was most disappointed in was the decision. I didn't disagree necessarily, but Charles Jourdain, Air Jourdain versus Sean Woodson. What do we think of this one, boys?
That was tough to watch. Not like as in bad performance, but it was tough to judge that fight. Because Sean Woodson was doing a lot of defense, right? He wasn't attacking much. He wasn't landing, too many shots. Maybe a few jabs and kicks here and there. Jourdain was the aggressor in this fight. And to see him lose is kind of unfortunate. I like Jourdain. He was making a good effort. I think he was putting himself out there more than Woodson was, but he didn't get the win. That's a tough matchup. He's like 3 inches taller, like a 10-inch reach advantage. Even though Jourdain is tall for that division, Sean Woodson's 6'2", 6'3". So he's tough to fight, and he couldn't get the takedowns. That also kind of hurt him a little bit. But he was more aggressive, and I think he made more of an effort to engage than Sean, and Sean still got the win, which I hate seeing it go that way. But he probably landed a higher percentage of shots, and he was more efficient, and maybe the judges thought he was in control of the fight. But, yeah, that's a tough one to judge.
This is tough when the dude's like that tall and featherweight. A funny thing I saw online was that Sean Woodson used to fight at like 200 pounds. So he's cutting all the way to featherweight being 6'2". I thought that was kind of funny. So, I mean, it's hard to fight a guy like that. I feel like this was like a really bad matchup for Charles Jourdain. And like you said, Brad, Woodson did everything he needed to do basically to win, slip out of Jourdain's jabs. He wouldn't let Jourdain get into pockets. So, yeah, not a good look for Jourdain, but maybe he can have another comeback fight.
Yeah, I don't think he's toast. He's an action fighter, and they love him. They book him all the time. So this is by no means like, oh my God, it's toast. It's just like, it's a setback a little bit.
Yeah. I also wanted to say, to touch on, backtrack a second. I feel like the tone for like the Canadian fighters was set in a bad way because it did start off with Jimmy Flick submitting Malcolm Gordon. So I feel like that was like, you get submitted by an American guy named Jimmy Flick. He's 17-7, not a horrible fighter, but that sets the bad tone for the Canadian fighters for the rest of the card, and we saw the result of that. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick.
Is it a matter of
good when you're getting submitted by Jimmy Flick from the United States?
Canada, we're not trying to hate on you guys, but is it a matter of grit? Maybe us Americans are so tough because of all the chemicals and pesticides that we are constantly ingesting. It's just making us strong. You know what I mean? We're almost like being preserved, like pickled.
Maybe Sean Strickland had a point in that press conference. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
I think Sean Strickland needs to run for president. Take Trudeau's spot. I mean, if Sean Strickland was the president of Canada, like all the Canadian fighters would have went 7-0. Like we all know that. So
yeah. And finally, Canada will have a prime minister that there will be no conspiracy theory where he's secretly Fidel Castro's son. That's one of my favorite conspiracies of all time, that Justin Trudeau is the illegitimate son of Castro.
He'll get his ban, Alex.
Yeah, right.
Conspiracy theory.
We'll touch the line. We can't cross the line.
Yeah.
There we go. So we can just dance on it.
Speaking of let down, Mike Malott, let's just touch on that. Wow, that's the big fight of the night.
That was the golden child.
That was the golden child. That was their new GSP. That was their only shot at UFC gold in the male UFC division, the male side of things. That was their only hope.
This is
and he botched it. And he botched it badly. He was winning the first 2 rounds. Is that right?
Yeah.
So you go with 15, 20, 30 seconds left in the fight, and you get submitted or punched, DKO. How do you have 30 seconds left? Someone's in mount. He was just covering up. You have 30 seconds. Bro, just try to fight and get out. Yeah. You cover up with 30 seconds left in a 15-minute fight. And this is like
how flattened was he? I forget. Was Neil Magny's hooks in? Was he grapevining him?
He wasn't. Malott wasn't really fighting to get out. He was just accepting it. So I think you can always push the knee, do the hip skate, which you learn in Jiu-Jitsu 101. He was doing none of that. He was just laying there covering up. And I was thinking, the ref would probably stop it because it was 30, 40 seconds left by the time he got in mount and started landing punches. He stopped the fight. And I think it was a good decision to stop it. He wasn't fighting back. I mean, give Neil Magny credit. He took advantage of the moment,
Magny's a salty dog, man. He's a vet. You cannot count him out. He's always there in the fight. And talk about an ill-advised decision, though. I mean, let's go back. We know where it went wrong. He started going for leg entanglements.
That's right.
Dude,
That's
you're
right.
up.
Yeah.
You're totally up. Everything was going fine. Even if, I think Luke Thomas said this on his wrap-up to the show. He goes, he could have gotten 10-8'd in the last round. He still probably would have won. Or at least had a split. You know what I mean? Depending on how bad the beating was. He wasn't visibly damaged, but he got pounded out. This was almost identical to the way Magny took out Hector Lombard back in the day. He got steamrolled for 2 rounds, and then at the very end, just started pouring it on. Or it might have even been only 2 rounds. That was a standout, man. We saw him kind of, poop the bed, unfortunately. I disagreed with this decision a little bit, the split decision. I wanted to pick your guys' brains on this. Chris Curtis against Marc-Andre Barrio. That was a big Canadian, hope in a lot of ways. He's a great prospect, man. I mean, he's starting to be less a prospect, more just a vet at this point. But I kind of had Marc-Andre on this one after watching it. I was a little surprised.
It was 30-27 for 2 judges.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wild. There was no home cooking. I was surprised by that. I mean, all the decisions that were close went to not for the Canadians.
That's a good sign.
It's a good sign, but it was very surprising. I thought they'd get more favor than that, but that was a close fight too. I think Chris Curtis, he edged it out, but I think 30-27 is preposterous. I think it was probably 29-28. Honestly, on 2 judges' cards, that'd probably be my guess watching the fight. But I don't know, man. Yeah, it has the same style as Strickland. They train together, of course, but they just jab, touch. They're not unloading any. There's no haymakers thrown in these fights. With Chris Curtis, Sean Strickland, at that gym. I wish they would extend themselves a little more and throw some more power in their punches, try to get a finish. But I think they spar so much. They're just another day in the office. I'm just sparring again. I don't think they get lackadaisical when they don't finish their opponents like we want them to.
They're just in a
Do you
rhythm.
agree? I mean,
They're stuck in a rhythm. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're frozen. They're watching the work, watching it happen. And it's kind of okay, well, I'm in this fight. I'm still in this fight.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of that with Francis and Tyson, to be honest with you. There was periods where it's he was still in the fight, but Francis was pretty much getting numerically outlanded per round in pretty much every round. And, I love Eric Nixick, man. He's a killer coach. And he's brought amazing results. And I think when he got Sean to sit down on punches, we might actually thank Pereira for that, because he trained with him as well. But when he sat down on that 1-2 piece with Izzy, I was I almost came up out of my chair. I almost walked out of the bar when that happened, to be honest with you. It was one of my worst meltdowns when Anderson lost. I just walked out of the bar. I couldn't do it. I was too depressed. But I think there is still hope for Canada, because I think maybe we train Brad. and we send him over the border. You go to TriStar, start training with GSP and Faraz Sahabi, and maybe you become the next hope. Is that it?
Well, let me ask you guys a question, because I didn't get to touch on the mic thing. I wanted to touch on that real quick, but I was gonna say, like, I was just confused why they were hyping him up so much. He didn't have a good record. He took a long break from fighting. He was coaching. He didn't really have any impressive wins. I mean, and he got all finishes, but I looked at his opponent's records. They weren't that great. But you get some of the UFC bias of like, oh, like maybe he is good. Maybe they're seeing something I'm not seeing. So maybe they just want to find a Canadian fighter to hype up. I mean, he was the best option that they had to bring UFC to Canada to get, pay-per-views back there like they did. So I don't know who's going to be like that next Canadian fighter they're going to hype up. So yeah,
that was the one. I thought he would dominate Neil Magny. I really did.
Yeah, I mean,
even
he
after
signed with Happy Dad.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, he's like, they've invested a lot into him. Like, I saw videos all week of him, and it's like, part of me, I'm not saying I thought he was going to win, but part of me was like, why is he getting hyped up so much? I'm just a little confused. He's late in his career a little bit. He doesn't really have any impressive wins. I mean, you look at Chris Curtis, like he's around the same age, but he has like all this past fight history. I mean, he felt Bilal like in 2013, like like they fight they fight good fighters up before they get to the UFC, but I just didn't really see anything that like caught my eye.
Well, look at Duplessis. I mean, he hadn't really fought anybody before Whitaker, really.
That's true.
And he just ran through Whitaker, ran through Sean, like maybe Izzy next. I don't know. But then Mike Malott, after the fight, when they were, announcing the winner, he's still sitting down.
Yes,
like,
dude.
Bro, get up and stand there. Like, what are you doing? Like, you didn't get knocked out cold. Yeah, like get off the chair. Like you're supposed to be a future star, and you're not now because you got your balls busted. But man,
he wasn't even there for the hand raise, dude. Like,
yeah,
if like people who get knocked out can stand there for the hand raise. Like we've seen that numerous times. They're knocked out cold and they're standing there. Like the only time they don't stand there is like Bryce Mitchell when they're like literally like having a seizure on the ground. Like this guy literally just lost with like minor ground and pounds. Like Neil was just like, all right, when is this gonna end? He doesn't even stand up for the decision. I don't know.
That was weak.
His heart was
all the
broken.
Canadian fighters, they're all weak.
Oh.
The line in the sand has been drawn, Brooks. You know what?
GSP needs to come out of retirement, come to UFC 300,
right the ship.
Hey, yeah, bring Canada back.
I think the best thing that came out of America is Terrence and Phillip, man. They're amazing. But I think with this here, it's like the hype machine of UFC in action. And that's what you're recognizing, Simon, is I think they know how to package their fighters and promote them, I think, at this point, better than pretty much any other promotion. And Dana's smart. He doesn't let the one single fighter necessarily become bigger than the entire promotion. He's always said that from the beginning. Those leaked texts with, Lorenzo about John show you kind of what's going on with that, is that like he doesn't want the fighter to become so big that they're bigger than the promotion and they make all the calls. So, sometimes they throw a little bit of that juice behind it and it's like, guy doesn't really live up to the expectations, but hey, what can you do?
In conclusion,
go ahead. I was gonna say, all jokes aside, like hopefully they do have some better contenders coming up, and as annoying as Happy Dad and Nelk is, maybe they can have a better sponsor in the future.
Yeah, disappointing night for the Canadians.